Is the scriptural time to begin Bible study. It's good to see you all here this morning. We're so happy to have Brother Roger Campbell with us this week. Brother Roger is currently preaching at Greens Lake Road in Chattanooga and was for several years preaching at the Union Grove Church here in Bradley County. We're glad to have him and Donna with us this week, and so we will be ready now to begin our Bible study and have Brother Roger Campbell come and speak to us.
If you have a Bible, would you go ahead and open your Bible to Jeremiah chapter 10? Jeremiah chapter 10. The theme of our lessons this week is examining the evidence. And I think it's pretty obvious that the lesson that we're going to be doing during this Bible class is the foundation for all of the topics that we're going to consider this week. God willing, tonight we'll look at the question, is Jesus really the Son of God? Well, if there's no God, and our question this morning is, does God really exist? If there's no God, then you can't talk about the Son of God. And we'll talk one night, do marriage matters and gender matters really matter to God? Well, again, if there's no God, there's no point in talking about those other questions. So our topic this morning is laying the foundation for everything else that we're going to be considering. Maybe a conversation could go like this. Sally, seriously? I thought since you're an engineer, you wouldn't believe in you really believe in God? Because I've always wondered, did God create humans or did humans imagine God? You may encounter that type of discussion or that type of idea. I certainly have. Back in the days of Moses, God sent Aaron and Moses to speak to the mighty monarch of Egypt, and the message was for Pharaoh to let the Israelites go. And Pharaoh's response was, "Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice?" Exodus chapter 5 and verse number 2. So Pharaoh's response basically was, the Israelites stay. Well, that attitude that Pharaoh manifested, who is God and why should I care about what God has to say? That's a mindset that has existed throughout the world, throughout history. And so what we want to do this morning is we want to look at evidence that helps us in answering the question, does God really exist? Now, among those individuals who are not convinced that there's a God, maybe they use different labels for themselves. And, in using those labels, as we talk about people, we don't mean to speak disrespectfully, but sometimes individuals, they will identify themselves or label themselves as an atheist, okay? An atheist is one who affirms that there is no God, okay? An agnostic would be an individual, they may not say, well, I can guarantee there's no God, but their approach is more along the lines of, I'm not saying there's no God, but there's no way you can know for sure. So an agnostic is more along the lines of nobody can know for sure. And then there would be someone who might call themselves a skeptic or a doubter. And he says, well, I hear where you're coming from. I understand what you're saying, but I'm just not convinced. They would be a skeptic or a doubter. Well, why should a person believe that God exists? We're going to look at two main areas of evidence this morning, but let me first of all mention what I call rotten reasons. These are not legitimate reasons for believing in God. And if you're trying to persuade someone to become a believer in God, run away from these approaches. Sometimes people say, well, I believe in God because for example, I believe in God because that's what my grandma taught me. And you might be talking with the person, they say, that's really interesting. Because I was going to tell you the reason I don't believe in God is because that's the way my grandma taught me. So believing in God just because someone else does, that's not a legitimate reason. That's not persuasive. That's not any type of proof or evidence. That's simply admitting I've been influenced by this person's approach to a certain topic. Someone else says, well, I'm just going to tell people that I can feel God in my heart, and because I can feel God inside of me, then that's why I believe in Him. And again, you may get the same type of response. That's interesting, because I was going to tell you the reason I don't believe in God is because I can't feel Him. Does God exist cannot be answered by the question, I feel Him or I don't feel Him. Or sometimes you might read about some type of event that takes place, may even be a catastrophe. Here's a large living complex that collapses, and under the rubble, after 2.5 days, a 3-month-old baby is found, and somebody says, if that doesn't prove there's a God, I don't know what could. And I've often thought, what are you going to say to those 107 people, to their families? They didn't survive. Are you going to tell them that their death proves that there's a God? So things like that are not evidence whether God exists or not, okay? So I want to talk this morning about design. Now look, there are some $10 labels for some of these approaches. There are some fancy Dan words, but I grew up on a hog farm, okay? So we like to keep it simple. So this morning we're going to take two basic approaches as we talk about evidence for the existence of God. One of those is going to be the thought of design, and one of them that's connected with it is going to be the idea of cause and effect. And the idea of design is when you see something and you see the complexity of that object or that being, you conclude in order for there to be design in a building or whatever it is, there had to have been intelligence behind this product. There had to have been an intelligent planner, an intelligent designer. Now, I don't know what kind of wheels you prefer over others. I don't know if you're a Chevrolet person, a Ford person, a Toyota, whatever it is, but you see the same thing. The existence of a motor vehicle, did that come about by accident or did it come about by plan? When you look at the fenders and you look at the motor and you look at the steering wheel and everything that comprises a vehicle, you're going to come to the conclusion this didn't come about by accident. Same thing when you look at the skyscrapers of the world. You are looking at the tallest twin towers in the world. Been in those buildings. They're located in downtown Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. But when you look at a building of that size or even a smaller one, hey, even some structure on your property, and you see within that building, you see walls, and you see ceilings, and you see doors, and you see lights, and you see light switches. What's your conclusion? Did that structure just fall into place in such a wonderful, usable form, or was it planned? Well, obviously, when you see design, you know there's been a designer, there's been a plan that's been involved. The same thing, I don't know what kind of device you use, whether you have a laptop or a tablet or a smartphone, but within each of those, you get the same picture, don't you? There's design, and where there's design, there had to have been a designer. Even when you go to Bible camp. Now, some of y'all have been campers at McCroy Bible Camp. Some of y'all have been visitors. One of our adult workers at camp this year, she and her husband had been on a trip out west for a few weeks, not long before camp. She had been a camper. She'd been a junior counselor. Now she's a full-fledged counselor where she gets no pay. And I said, well, tell me about your trip. And she was telling me, I said, well, Did you smell anything on the trip that smells like Camp McCroy? She said, Brother Roger, nothing smells like Camp McCroy. But now those, I'm sorry, those shirts got 3 words on the front, McCroy Bible Camp. Did those words get on there? And did those letters get in that same exact order? To spell those 3 words properly. Did that happen by accident or by plan? The only accident in that photo is we didn't intend to get those women in the background. I'm looking at some of y'all. Okay? Now, let's think about our universe, okay? We've talked about automobiles, we've talked about skyscrapers, we've talked about technological devices, we've talked about shirts. What about in our universe? And again, if there is evidence of design, then there must have been an intelligent designer behind that. In our Bibles, you find your way to Jeremiah 10. We're going to get there in just a minute. I just wanted to give you plenty of time to find Jeremiah, okay? But in Psalm 19, beginning in verse 1, the Bible says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Maybe you've seen in person or seen on the news or seen in some fashion, here's a small plane, and it's flying really low to the ground, and on the back of the plane there's a banner. And the banner may say vote for somebody, or it may say fire Coach Saban or something like that. Well, it's as if the heavens have a banner across them that says God made us. That is, by looking at the universe, an individual can conclude properly, this universe didn't come into existence by choice. This universe didn't come into existence by accident. There had to have been a plan with an intelligent planner. Look in your Bible in Jeremiah 10. And in Jeremiah 10, we're going to go back a couple of verses. Jeremiah is speaking about a contrast between the real God and man-made gods. Go back and look, if you would, at let's start in verse 8. But they are altogether brutish and foolish. The stock is a doctrine of vanities, that is, a wooden stock and idol. Silver spread into plates is brought from Tarshish, and gold from Uphaz, the work of the workman and of the hands of the founder. Blue and purple, it's talking about those different aspects of idolatry. Verse 10 says, but the Lord is the true God. He is the living God and an everlasting King. At his wrath the earth shall tremble, and the nations shall not be able to abide his indignation. Now drop down to verse 12. Here's the real God now. He has made the earth by his power. He hath established the world by his wisdom, and has stretched out the heavens by his discretion. So there are 3 aspects of God creating the universe that are mentioned in verse number 12. One is God's power, one is God's wisdom, and one is God's discretion or God's will. Power, wisdom, and discretion. And so as we work through this lesson today and think about the amazingness of the universe, and in particular, we're going to be talking about some of the complexities of the human body. The thought again is, if there is design, then there must have been an intelligent designer. Okay? Now, in our universe, we got different critters. And when you think about an eagle who flies at an amazing speed, eagles, they're not made to swim underwater and live underwater. That's not their domain of existence. And sharks, they're not made to soar in the sky. And elephants, they're not made to do either one. They get their water through a trunk. But now eagles don't have trunks, and sharks don't have wings. So did the shark say when they were lining up, said, I'd like to swim? And the eagle said, well, I'd like to fly. And the elephant said, I just feel good right here on this old ground. That works better. No, that's not what happened. It wasn't by choice. It wasn't by accident. And you and I don't do any of those three things. We don't fly and we don't live underwater as fish do. And we don't get our water through a trunk. We're made differently. Not by choice, not by accident. There's design. And where there's design, there must have been an intelligent designer. So when you think about the universe and our distance in our solar system, our distance from the sun, which is, it's a Bible class, so I might ask some questions. How far are we from the sun? Somebody throw me out a number. How many million miles? Who said it? Oh, look at Sam. Hey, Sam, you're amazing, okay? Now, I didn't call Sam last night and said, let's work this out. 93 million miles, okay? That's the distance. Now, if we were like 10% closer, what's going to be the consequence? We're burning up. Too hot. Too hot. If we're 10% further away, then you're going to have we're just going to be too cold in terms of the existence of living things on the earth. And as the earth is orbiting the sun, in that annual orbit we take to get around the sun, the earth is turning on its axis. And it's at a tilt of 23.5 degrees. Now, you can look it up. Scientists will tell you that 23.5 degree tilt is just what is best for the planet Earth. And so you step back and you say, well, did the earth work that out in its mind? The earth says, I'm going to position myself right here at this distance from the sun because I think that'll work best. And I'm going to give myself a little tilt, not 14 degrees and not 37, that'd be extreme. I'm going to put it at 23. It wasn't by choice. It wasn't by accident. It was by plan. And as the earth is orbiting the sun, it follows a precise, predictable orbit. So that you pick the year, you pick the month, you pick the day of the month, you pick the time of the day, and scientists, way over my pay grade, but scientists can predict with precision, with tremendous accuracy, exactly where the sun will be in its orbit. And so you look at these factors. You look at, well, our distance from the sun, the 23.5 degree tilt as we're orbiting, the precise orbit we have, and you look at those things individually and you say, man, it just doesn't move my needle. But when you look at all of them collectively, you're seeing a system that was made with design. It wasn't by the earth's choice, it wasn't by accident, but by design. And where there's design, there must be a designer. We're going to talk about the human body. Talk about some aspects. And look, there are going to be some aspects of the human body that we're not going to delve into this morning. The amazingness of the eye, the amazingness of the ear, and different body parts. But we have within our bodies, we've got some amazing stuff. Now, what do you read there in Psalm 139 and verse 14? The psalmist said, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. That's what we are. We're fearfully, we're amazingly and wonderfully made. And the observation in Proverbs 20 and verse 12 is, the hearing ear and the seeing eye, the Lord hath made even both of them. Okay? The ear has a function. The eye has a function. And they're amazing. Now, when you think about, and this is not an advertisement for British Airways. Okay? Anybody ever ridden on British Airways? I did it once. It was fabulous. It was fabulous. But you take a Boeing 747-400, there are a gazillion parts that go into that thing. You've got millions of parts, and guess what? None of those parts are flying parts. Wings just laying out here on the ground, wings on a shelf in the hangar, wings don't fly. Those nuts and bolts and screws and seats, those things don't fly. The motor doesn't fly. But when you put them all together and you know what you're doing, and you hit the ignition, it'll not only start up, that thing will get up there and cruise at 40,000 miles, and if you let yourself, you'll forget you're even on an airplane. And you can ride that thing for hour after hour after hour. Longest flight we've ever had when we were going to Malaysia on one occasion from Chicago to Hong Kong, over 16 hours. Okay, 16 hours. That's the way those things work. Now, who would say, in answer to the question, that an airplane just fell into place and it functions by accident? Who's going to raise their hand and say, that's what I believe? None of us would believe that, because we see the design and know that there must have been a designer. Well, how much more the human body? The human body has 11 organ systems, 78 organs, and 206 bones in an adult body. Now, what's just as a matter of curiosity, we're talking about the 78 organs. What's the largest organ? I didn't even finish my question. I was going to say, what's the largest organ inside your body? No, I wouldn't. It's the skin. Did you Google it like I did this morning? Okay. Yeah, it's the skin. Okay, we're going to talk about that in a minute. Now, I didn't put the number of cells up there yet. About 30 trillion cells. Now, I don't know how it works with you in your mind. Once you get up to a certain number, I'm just in the category, well, that's a lot. Right? Somebody's got $500,000, well, that's a lot. Somebody's got $3 billion, well, that's more than that other fellow. But in terms of registering how much, but that's what we got going on inside of our body, okay? And in our body, we got DNA, that's what makes you, okay? That's our genetic makeup. And 99.9% of your genetic makeup is the same as mine. That's why Tanner Thompson and Richard Wright and I look alike, and you can't tell us apart most of the time. No, it's that 0.1% that makes us different. So that code, who programmed the code? Somebody had to program the code to make it what it is. You've got design, you've got to have a designer. Our heart and our circulatory system. How did our body know that it needed a heart? How did our body know it's for my well-being that I have a blood pumper? Wasn't by choice. It certainly wasn't by accident. On average, and you may or not be average, same for me. On average, a person's heart beats about 100,000 times every day. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not in the habit of getting up and saying, hey, little guy, I hope you do your thing today. But if I'm only beating around 20,000, I may have an issue, right? And every day the blood pumps about 2,000 gallons of blood. You say, well, where's it all come out? Well, it doesn't come out. We know the consequence of that. It's an internal system. It's an amazing system, and the setup is arteries carry the blood away from the heart, and veins bring the blood back to the heart. How did the arteries know they're supposed to take it that away, and how did the veins know they're supposed to bring her back? It wasn't by choice. It wasn't by accident. There's an intricate system there, and it's by design. And where there's design, there had to have been a designer. Well, you talk about the lungs and our respiratory system. How do our lungs function? They take in air, and they get that into the bloodstream and send it to the different parts of the body, and our lungs kick out the carbon dioxide. And every day we take in about 2,900 gallons of air. You say, well, how's it stay inside of me? I'd be, that's the way it's made. That's the way that it's made to function in that capacity. Now, how did the body know that it needed lungs and a respiratory system? It's not by choice that we have them. It's not by accident that we have them, but it is, as we say, a well-oiled machine. And where there's design, there must have been a designer. There you go, skin, okay? Skin. Dermis, epidermis, hypodermis. Our skin functions in a number of ways. It protects, it senses, the sense of pressure and pain and heat and all those things. Well, our skin accounts for about 15% of our body. See, if I could just get rid of my skin, I could lose 15% of what I have. Well, I don't think you want to get rid of your skin, okay? It's there for a purpose. And every minute, 30,000 to 40,000 cells are renewed every minute. So within 28 days, you've got a new skin cover. Now, how many of you have a roof at your house that redoes itself every 28 days? But that's what our body has, okay? The skin working in that capacity. Was it by choice? Not by choice. By accident? Not by accident. It had to have been by plan. Where there's a plan and design, there had to have been a designer, okay? Same thing about our brain and the way that it functions. The brain uses about 20% of the blood and the oxygen. Now, is that by choice? Is that by accident? Or is that by plan? And the brain has a gazillion. What's the number? That screen is getting smaller. About 100 billion neurons present in the brain. Those neurons are cells that take information throughout the body. Okay, so if you've got a computer, I said you've got the latest computer, you've got the latest smartphone. Well, isn't there somebody that had to put the smart in the smartphone? And you think about, wow, those people's intelligence must be off the charts that can design those things, and they actually work, and there are people who actually can repair them to get them back in working order. But what about the intelligence of the one who designed the designers of that type of equipment? What about the one who provided humans with that type of intelligence? It all calls for intelligence behind the plan, okay? Now, here's one that perhaps doesn't get a lot of attention, but I think it's a powerful thought. The reproductive system of human beings. How did humans know that they needed a reproductive system? Do we have those by choice? Do we have those by accident, or is it by plan? And how did humans know, you know what, we better divide into male and female. We need at least two genders because we know that human males with human males, they can't produce another child. And human females with human females, they can't produce another child. It takes male and female interaction. How did humans know we've got to have these reproductive organs? And how do they know that we've got to have this interaction in order for that to work? And so we have those not by choice, and we have those not by accident. We have those by, may I say it again, we have those by design. We have those by plan. And where you have design, you have an intelligent designer behind that. And the Bible calls this intelligent designer God. Now, let's talk a little bit about cause and effect. And you'll see some similarities. In fact, with some of these issues, we talk about cause and effect. You could even use it along the lines of the design. And the cause and effect argument goes basically like this. For every result or every effect, there must be an adequate cause, a legitimate explanation. Here's something that's happened. Here's something that exists. How do you explain what's happened? How do you explain what exists? You go into Walmart or you go into Lowe's and you come out to the parking lot and something's going on with your vehicle. That wasn't there when you went in. You've got these scratches all over your vehicle and you're about to break your neck turning around to see it. Who did that? If I could get my hands on that. Or maybe it wasn't at Walmart. Maybe it's grandma was taking care of 3 grandkids, ages 3, 4, and 5, and grandma got busy baking chocolate chip cookies, and then something caught her attention. You know what it was? She couldn't hear the grandkids. And you know, when you can't hear the grandkids or the kids, something's up. And grandma got out there and she took a look at her car, and she knew that one or all of them were in on this. And by the time grandma gets done with them, they're going to do more than miss out on cookies, I can tell you that. But there's got to be a reason why those scratches are on that car. The scratches are the effect. Now, what caused that? That's the question. You got a cake. And this cake, amazingly enough, has words on it, and those words are written in such an order that it spells words. Happy birthday. And it's even in blue color. Now, that's the effect. There has to be a legitimate explanation, right? There has to be a cause to get that result. Now, what about the universe? Here's your effect. The universe exists. What's the adequate cause? What's the legitimate explanation? Not by choice, not by accident, but by design. In Hebrews chapter 3 and verse number 4, the Bible says, every house is built by some man, but he that built all things is God. And so if you want to think about the universe as being a big house, here's a structure that exists. Every structure is built by some man. He that built all things is God. And so the universe then is the effect. It's the result. There has to be a legitimate cause, a legitimate explanation. And the Bible's answer is it's God. In Psalm 90 and verse number 2, the psalmist said, from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. Now, how did this world... So the explanation is the world came into existence because God wanted it to happen. And number 2, the world came into existence because God made it happen. Look in your Bible. What are you going to look? It's on the screen, if I can see that far. But in Psalm 33, here is an amazing piece of literature that goes with the message of Genesis chapter 1. You know, in Genesis 1, we don't have all the details, right? We have a skeleton sketch of what transpired. We know from Genesis 1 and verse 3, God said, let there be light, and boom, there was light. And we know that God said he wanted there to be fish living in the seas, and that happened. But in Psalm 33, you've got this explanation, by the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the host of them by the breath of his mouth. Now, that's how it happened. God spoke and it happened. Now, the next part of the verse answers the question, okay, that's what happened. How should humans respond to that? When humans learned that this world came into existence by the mighty hand of God, when God spoke and it took place, how should humans respond to such an awesome being? And the answer there is given. Let all the earth fear the Lord, and the inhabitants of the earth stand in awe of him. He is indeed an amazing God. And God said this about himself. He said, I am the first and the last, and beside me there is no other God. Isaiah 44 and verse number 6. We've examined a miniature portion of the evidence, and we found an answer that is clearly seen, that yes, God exists. Now, what's God like? We know from the creation that he's powerful and he's wise, but what about his